Okay, so it's film of the year time, and I'm sure you've all been desperate to hear mine. So I will lift the suspense. It's been a pretty good year for films. Even the blockbusters such as No Time to Die and Dune, or Dune, or Dune, or Dunny, or however you say it, were both pretty good spectacles, not without their flaws, but were both very much watchable. But my favourite film of the year, and this is not what I think is the best film, but it's the one that I enjoyed the most, was Come On, Come On by director Mike Mills, who disappointingly wasn't the bassist in R.E.M., but is a respected director in his own right. And it features Joaquin Phoenix, who plays Johnny, who is a radio presenter interviewing kids and young people in various cities throughout the US, asking them quite sort of far-reaching questions about their lives and how they see their future. And through a family emergency, he has to start looking after his 9-year-old nephew, Jesse, who's played by Woody Norman. And Johnny has to go through this crash course in modern parenting, basically. And in order to occupy his young ward, he often gives him his sound recording equipment. And so Jesse uses this to explore the cities that they travel to, most notably New York, which is introduced by an absolutely stonking early Lou Reed track when he was writing for The Primitives, which is suitably grotty and wild and exciting. The film centres around this relationship between the two of them, and whereas Johnny is usually in his day job the one asking the questions of the children, when Jesse turns up he starts asking questions of Johnny, quite deep questions that Johnny would probably rather not have to think about, let alone speak about or justify. But it actually gets him to start dealing with some of these issues that are affecting him, whilst also providing Jesse with the unavoidable truth that the adults don't know what they're doing either. And it's a film about listening to each other, but it's not one that feels that it has to hit you over the head with this message. It's a very loving and subtle and incredibly well acted in terms of the relationship between Johnny and Jesse, but also with Jesse's mum, played by Gabby Hoffman. The relationship between those three central characters is fundamental, and it feels very real. It's a wonderful film. And so these next films are not in any particular order, but they're just highlights from the year. And the first one I'd like to pick out is The Dig, with Ralph Fiennes and Carey Mulligan in the lead roles. It shares this kind of similar big sky cinematographic language of Nomadland, which gives this kind of carefree, easy wistfulness. And there's a way that they continue the scene, but they decouple the dialogue from the images in a similar way to the TV series American Crime, which gives a greater sense of the emotional connection between the characters. And it's a film that does want to redress this overlooked contribution to our historical knowledge. But more than that, it doesn't get hung up on this message. It is just a quietly and wonderfully engaging film that I highly recommend. The best documentary for me this year is, without doubt, The Reason I Jump. This is based on a book by Naoki Higashida, which was translated into English by Keiko Ishida and her husband, the British author David Mitchell. Not that one, the other one. And in the film, they tried to create an audio-visual representation of how people with non-verbal autism experience the world. And it does what all good documentaries should do, which is take a subject that you might know something about or not much about and completely give you a new perspective on it. And for me, this really was a before and after film. Special mentions have to go to The Summer of Soul, which is a Questlove directed documentary about the 1969 Harlem Cultural Festival, and it features some absolutely incredible performances by the likes of Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder, and Nina Simone at her most imperious. And I'd also recommend The Truffle Hunters, which follows a group of old men and the dogs that they dote over as they hunt for truffles in the woods of northern Italy. It is an absolutely beautifully shot documentary. Every scene is just so wonderfully composed. Okay, next up is Apples, directed by Christos Nikou and part of the Greek Weird Wave films. It follows Aris, who's the latest person to suffer in this pandemic, which is causing people to develop amnesia. And he takes part in a program to make up for these lost memories by completing certain rites of passage. The comedy is in the tasks that they're asked to perform, and there are quite a few sort of very funny moments in this. And the little hints of their past lives that they discover through the things that they can do. But it also asks questions about what we consider to be the constituent components of a lived life. Basically, every time that Celine Sciamma makes a film, it's going to make it onto my best of the year list. She's probably my favourite filmmaker at the moment. And Petit Maman is certainly no different. It's a very short film. It's only about sort of 70, 75 minutes long, but it explores the relationship between this young girl and her mother. And she gets to meet her mother at the same age, basically. And it shows this relationship when they're both on pretty much an equal footing, and highlights the intelligence that children have and often goes overlooked. I've loved pretty much everything she's done up until this point, from Water Lilies through to Portrait of a Lady on Fire and her screenplay for My Life as a Courgette. And I can't wait to see Paris 13th District, which is her screenplay for a Jacques Audiard film, which will be out in the new year. Last of the films that were released this year is I'm Your Man, directed by Maria Schrader, who also directed the excellent Unorthodox series on Netflix. Now, it follows Marion Eggert's character, Alma, who is given an AI representation of her perfect man called Tom, and that's played by Dan Stevens. Now, although it's meant to be based on Alma's choices, there is a sense that Tom has been programmed by a male IT technician's idea of what women want based on internet surveys. Now, whilst this gives you quite a lot of comic moments and really, really funny moments in it, as Tom learns more about Alma, she starts to warm to him, and it then starts to raise questions about our relationships with this type of technology and highlights sort of certain dangers for the future. I'm going to finish with a film that I first saw this year, but it's actually from 1955. It's Rififi, directed by Jules Dassin. And this is something that has everything that you could possibly want from a film noir heist. It has the meticulous planning of the job itself, the selecting of the certain characters and the roles that they're going to play. It has an alluring, slightly dangerous cabaret act love interest. The heist itself has gone down in cinematic history. And because of this tendency of noir films to finish badly for the main characters, it keeps this tension right to the end of the film. But really, it's the fluidity of the movements of the actors in even the most incidental of scenes that means this is one of the best directed films that I've ever seen, and why it's getting a mention on this list. Okay, thank you for listening, and I hope that if you've not seen these films that you go and check them out. I've been pretty careful not to put any spoilers in there, but you can never completely rule it out. Anyway, thanks again, and let me know what your film highlights were for 2021.